Shalom, my dear friends. Shalom from the holy city of Jerusalem, Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh. Today, the penultimate day of the month of Adar of this year, 5778, 28th of Adar, one day before the eve of Rosh Chodesh. People today already, many observing Yom Kippur Katan, the small Day of Atonement, before what is indeed a Rosh Hashanah, one of the four heads of the year, coming on Friday night, and Shabbat, the Rosh Chodesh, new moon of Nisan, and we swing into a new level, God willing, of redemption. We've already seen some unfolding miracles this year, and with the help of God, we should be worthy of seeing yet more miracles. Today will be our last session of these Avram's Tent Kollel studies until after the Pesach break, and I hope to resume classes on Sunday, April the 15th, with a Shavuot Tov class, and then on Monday, April the 16th, with a continuing in our Kollel series and continuing to study the Terei Asar, the 12 shorter prophets, and continuing with our studies in the laws of kashrut, with the laws of the salting of meat. In the Terei Asar, the 12 shorter prophets, I would like to jump forward after today's study, which will be in the prophet Ovadiah, and after the break to come to the three prophets that lived specifically in the time of redemption at the building of the time of the building of the second temple, those being those at the end of the Terei Asar, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. The prophecies of Haggai and Malachi relatively short. Haggai 2 chapters and Malachi 3 chapters, and Zechariah, one of the major of the later prophets, 14 chapters, so that will give us our work for some months over the summer period, God willing. And for today then, let us turn now to our study of the Hebrew text of the prophet Ovadiah. Shalom, today the 28th day of the month of Adar of the year 5778, corresponding to the 15th of March of the year 2018. And today we study the prophet Ovadiah, jumping somewhat out of sequence in the study of the Terei Asar, the 12 shorter prophets, but nevertheless there are some historical discontinuities in the Terei Asar. Without doubt, Hosea is the earliest, as he himself states, and Malachi was the last of the prophets at the beginning of the Second Temple era, together with his fellow prophets Zechariah and Haggai. But the prophecy of Ovadiah, according to our sages, would actually be situated in time in the earlier generations after the building of the temple of King Solomon, in the reign of King Achav, the king of the northern kingdom, who took significant steps to deepen the deviation of the northern kingdom from the way of the Torah. And according to our sages, the prophecy of Ovadiah, which is concerned with the overthrow and downfall of Edom at the end of time, comes from the lips of one who was himself a Ger Tzedek, a righteous proselyte and a convert from the tribe of Ephraim. According to our sages, the prophet Ovadiah was from the offspring of Eliphaz, who figures in the book of Job as one of the friends and counselors of Job. And Eliphaz is also the name of the firstborn of Esau, Esav. And not only was Ovadiah a Ger Tzedek, he received Torah from Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, and lived in the time of Elijah, who prophesied during the reign of Achav and directly to Achav. And after Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah, was taken up in a chariot of fire to the heavens, Elisha, his disciple, was the leader, and Ovadiah was in the same time frame. And according to our sages, Ovadiah was, who is mentioned in the book of Kings, 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 3, as being the head of the household of King Achav, is none other than our Ovadiah of the prophecy. And this is a very remarkable feature of the period of the split of the kingdoms between the house of David and Jerusalem and the northern kingdom, that there were prophets of the supreme caliber of Eliyahu and Elisha who had direct contact with the kings of the northern kingdom, Eliyahu speaking to Achav and Elisha speaking to Yoram. And we see that despite the diversion of the northern kings from the way of the Torah, nevertheless there was a profound and deep respect among them for the Torah and from the true prophets. And to understand exactly what was the line of these kings and what was the nature of their deviation is to my mind extremely difficult. But here we are left with our text of the prophet Ovadiah, which is said by our sages to come from the mouth of this Ger Tzedek that was none other than the head of the household of Achav. And when Jezebel made her decree to kill all the prophets of Hashem, Ovadiah sacrificed put his life in danger by hiding prophets in caves and feeding them on at his own expense, to the point that he was completely cleaned out of all money and had to borrow money from none other than the royal household in order to sustain these prophets. And in fact, the episode that we find in the early part of second book of Kings, where a woman comes complaining to the prophet that she has no way to save her sons who are being taken into captivity by her creditor. This, it is said, is none other than the widow of the prophet Ovadiah, Ovadiah having borrowed money from the royal household and now having his children taken because he couldn't afford to pay back the money to Yoram, king of Israel. So all this is very profound mystery. As to the identity of Edom, of course, Edom is the name that is given to Esau in the Torah in Genesis, in the account of the birth of Jacob and Esau, the twins. And Esau comes out Admoni and is therefore throughout the Torah emblematic of Gevurah, of severe judgment and divine discipline and even chastisement. And Esau did not receive the blessings from Jacob. Jacob received from Isaac. Jacob was the one who received the blessings, and Esau was decreed to be in servitude to his brother. Now, according to the commentator Radak, in early times these nations were relatively identifiable. We find in the Book of Kings at various junctures how there are military operations involving and between and against the royal house of David in Jerusalem and the northern kingdom with the tribe of Edom. And we find this continuing in the Book of Kings, that Edom was an independent kingdom that was geographically located in the area of Mount Seir, which was given as the inheritance of Esau. And Mount Seir is in the southeast of Israel, in the very rugged Negev mountain wildernesses in the southeast of the country. And so geographically, Edom was located there, and we find in Deuteronomy that Moses has to lead the children of Israel around the territory of Edom to the southeast of Israel, because the Edomites will not let the Israelites through their territory. And there were the other nations, Moab, north of Edom, and further north Ammon, and then the whole swathes of territory further north in what is now the Golan area towards Syria, coming at different times under the kingship of the kings in Damascus and the kings of Aram, and all of the different nations that were neighbors of Israel all have prophecies against them in the major prophets of Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel of their ultimate downfall at the end of time because of their treachery to Israel. And none more than Edom, as we see in this prophecy. Well, Radak tells us that the people of Edom eventually infiltrated into other nations. There is a tradition that the Edomites were the original founders of the city of Rome, and indeed throughout the time of the obvious and manifest ascendancy of Rome, certainly in rabbinical literature, was identified with the Malchut Edom, the wicked kingdom of Edom. And, of course, the influence of Rome has spread way beyond Italy, across Europe and to many parts of the world. There is a tradition that where our rabbis speak about Aram, that can also be referring to Rome. And let's remember that the original regions of Aram were in what is today Syria, Iraq, and Turkey. And indeed, the beginnings of Christianity were in what is now Turkey, in those regions. And indeed, the Roman Empire had its capital move into Turkey, to Constantinople. So all of these are rabbinical associations. To identify exactly who or what the political entity of Edom would be considered to be today would be extremely difficult. But more than anything, I think what we are asked to look at in the prophecy of Ovadiah, which is one of the shortest of all of the prophets that have a specific book to their name, is that it is the mentality of Edom, and on account of the treachery of Edom, that they have this downfall. So with that, let us turn to the Hebrew text of Ovadiah. Chazon Ovadiah, Koi Omar Adonai Elohim Ledoim Shemua Shamanu Meis Adonai Vetzir Bagoyim Shuloch Kumu ונקומו עולהו למלחמו. Chazon Ovadiah, just like we have the same word in respect of Isaiah, Yeshayahu, here too Ovadiah. The word Ovadiah, the name, is made up of the root Eved, the servant of Yud-Kei, the servant of the eternal God, who opens with the word Ko, which is the word favored by our prophets, indicating the kaf of Ko is like this. That is to say that the prophet, with the exception of Moshe, who saw, as our sages said it, saw through aspaklaria me'ira, a clear screen, The other prophets saw God through a series of screens and could only say, like this did say the Lord God. When we see the two names of Adnut and Elokim together, these two names indicate Adnut Malchut, the executing Sphira, and above, up in the regions of the God's will and plan and intent is Binah, signified here by the second divine name, the Tetragrammaton, which is pronounced as Elokim. The two together indicate the juncture of the two levels of Bina, Elokim, and Adnut, the Malchut, which executes the plan of Bina. And this is what the burden of the prophet is to Edom. Shmua Shomanu Me'ez Hashem, we've heard the report from the But Tzir Bagoyim Shulach, there is an envoy, a messenger that has been sent out among the nations, and telling the nations to make a universal revolt against the ascendancy of Edom. Kumu v'nakumu oleo lamilchomo, arise, let us rise up against her to war. Well, certainly in the Talmud and the Midrashim, we see that it is Edom which will be destroyed at the end of time. And there are many indications it comes about through the other nations entering and pillaging. And this is what the prophet is immediately entering into here, that Edom is a major power at the end of time. This is specifically stated in the Talmud, in Babylonian Talmud, tractate Avodah Zarah, on the very beginning of the tractate, indicating that Edom, together interestingly with Paras, will be left at the end of days as the major power. And according to the Zohar, in a number of places, the Malchut of Edom will extend its tentacles across the world, somewhat reminiscent of the way that Anglo-Saxon culture has actually extended and spread its language across the entire world over the last hundreds and indeed thousands of years. What we have today in the world governmental structure are many things that have developed out of Roman government, and to try to identify again Edom as a political entity, I will not try, but I would suggest that we could consider looking at what is happening today to the United States of America, which indeed has a government center that is modeled on that of Rome in many ways, is the invasion of many, many peoples who are actually overthrowing certainly the intent of the original founding fathers of the country. And we do see, apparently, let us hope this will not be the case, but we do see a culture that has apparently become, on many levels, morbid, and we can look at this prophecy as we can others in Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel against Edom as somewhat looking forward to this present developing situation. Hinei koton nesaticho bagoyim bozui ato me'od. I will put you as the small one among the nations. You will be most despised. Well, big and small is what it's all about often for Edom. Edom is a paradigm of human arrogance and pomposity, and as we see in the coming verses, is the model of the search for self-aggrandizement and world power and control. And this is precisely what God is going to knock down. We see that many times in the Tanakh. Jacob is seen as the little brother, the small brother, but here at the end of days we see that it will be Edom that will be the small one. And why? This is explained in verse 3. Zedain libecho hishiacho Sheichni v'hagavei sela Maroi meshivetoi Oy mehi beliboi mi yorideni oretz. Zedon libecho, it is the arrogance of your heart, says the prophet to Edom. Zedon, this is the root that, when speaking about sins, a sin that is performed mezid is one that is performed by the perpetrator flagrantly. This is willful and deliberate rebellion against God, and this is what has lifted, has seduced and led Edom aside. Shochni b'chagvei selah, you dwell in the clefts of the rock. Well, certainly as a depiction of the ancient kingdom of Edom, there in the rocky wildernesses of the southeast of the Negev. We can certainly see this a very graphic image of this people that were occupying these rocky mountains and very well entrenched against any marauders, and from there able to go about their pillaging and their ravaging of surrounding areas, thinking there they have safety in Merom Shifto, their dwelling place upon high. Omer belibo mi yorideni oretz, he says in his heart, who will bring me down to the earth? Here we see a people indeed in contemporary modern developed world. We do see people dwelling in multi-story skyscrapers and flying around the world in jets, particularly the executive and the controlling class is flying around and dwelling in very impregnable fortresses, thinking who will ever bring this cream of the elite down. And God says, not so, in verse 4. Him tagbia kanesher, v'him bein koichovim sim kinecho, misham oiridecho neum adonoi. If you go up as high as the Nesher, the eagle, one of the four faces of the Chayot of the Merkava, the divine chariot, the eagle that soars above. And here is Edom trying to imitate the eagle and to go up between the stars to put your nest. Edom's seen as this predator bird. Misham oridecho num Hashem, from there shall I bring you down, says the Lord. And now depicting the overthrow of Edom, the unwitting overthrow when they get pulled down while they are pretty much asleep without realizing what is happening. And this in many ways seems to be what has developed in the present day America, where many migrants into the country have come and are getting all kinds of benefits that have not been and are not available today to veteran American citizens, many of whom have served the country with their very lives and their health and strength. And this is a situation which certainly seems to have an allusion to in our verse how the nations come against Edom, other nations, without Edom's even realizing it while they are slumbering. Verse 5. Im ganovihim baulecho im shodedei lailo eichenide meiso halo yignevu dayom im boitzrim ba'uloch halo yashiru oy leilohis. If thieves have come into you, if marauders of the night have entered, ich nidmeso. In our translation on the screen here, this phrase seems not to be adequately translated, but the connotation of the word nidmesa would be one of getting cut off to the point of becoming domem, being struck dumb. So here is an image of Edom in the state of stupor and lack of awareness, which is mirrored in similar prophecies against Edom in Jeremiah. All the people are weakened, their minds are not there. If it had been just marauders, they would have taken as much as they wanted and gone. If it was just botzrim, people who come to cut down the harvest. We've seen in our study of Yoel how the katsir, the harvest, and the batsir, the harvest of the grapes, signify the end of the rule of the nations. And here we have it with Edom. So if those coming to plunder the vineyards had come against you, they would have left the olelot. At least they would have left some gleanings. But no, you are utterly destroyed. I take it this is the translation of Eich Nidmeso, how you've been cut off. Verse 6. Eich Nechefesu Esau Niveho Matzpunov. Ich nechpesu. Nechpesu is from the root of chapes, to search. It's a nif'al. Esau has been searched out through and through. Niveu also is from the root bo'eh, as we find frequently in the Talmud, asking a question. How have the hidden away secrets of Edom been searched out and exposed? And in a way, today we can also see this happening when we see the endless revelations about the profound corruption of our governments and our ruling classes, and the moral decline of the world of entertainment and art and so on. It's all coming out into the open. It's all becoming bared. Well, verse 7, we see that Edom now is going to be driven out. The very people that appeared previously to be the members of the covenant Edom have duped Edom. Verse 7. Ad agavul shilechuchom kol anshei verisechom hishiyuchom yochlu lecho anshei shloimechom לחמכם ישימו מזור תחתכם הנה תבונה בו. To the very edges, the very border, have they sent you forth, all of the men of your covenant. They have seduced you, they've flattered you and persuaded you, and they overcame you. They have got the better of you. The very people that were the people of your peace, the people that seemed to be at peace with you, the nations are now turning against Edom in this rebellion, and your very bread, your very sustenance is now going to turn into mazor. Mazor being an expression with the connotation of a blow. For us, there is no understanding in Edom. They've become bereft of understanding. It would appear that in the very slick sophistication of the elite, they themselves have actually got themselves into a dead-end road. As he elaborates in verse 8, Haloi bayoimahu ne'um Adonai והעבדתי חכמים מידיים, וסבונו מהר Esau. On that day shall I destroy the sages from Edom, and all understanding shall pass from the mount of Esau. So the mount of Esau would be a symbol of the imperial power of Esau, and without sages, no malchut, no kingdom can survive. We do indeed see the ridiculous over-education of the members of today's think tanks, who through their experiments in social engineering are creating generations of peoples whose minds are really been destroyed. The dreamer generation, and we do see today this decline in the brain power of the West very clearly. Verse 9, V'hatu giborecho teimon leman Ikoreis ish mehar Esau mikotel. V'hatu giborecho, your mighty one shall be in a state of fear. They shall be broken up by the fear that will take hold of them. Addressing Teman. Teman is, although today understood in Hebrew as referring to the Yemen, the actual word of, as used in the Torah, Teman refers to regions that are south of the land of Israel, and Teman, the region to the south of the tribe of Judah, adjacent to the Holy Land, is another of the terms for Edom. So he's saying here that not a single person will survive the slaughter, that is to say, Leman yikoches ish, in order that ish, all that come under the category of ish, will be cut off on account of the slaughter. And why all of this? Now he's moving into the reproof of Edom. And here we see another parallel between the prophecy of Ovadiah and the prophecy of Yoel, where Yoel also at the end addressed the nations surrounding the promised land of Israel, including Edom, and reproved them for having so sold down the line Jacob. Verse 10, Meichamas ochicho Yaakov techasecho vusho v'nichrato le'olam. The same word as we saw in Joel's reproof to the nations, the Hamas, the violence and robbery and outrage and pillage perpetrated against your brother Jacob, that on account of that, busha, shame and disgrace shall cover you, and you should be cut off forever. We saw at the very beginning that of this prophecy in Ovadiah that Edom is called Katan, small, and Nivzeh, despised. And here is the same concept of Busha, the shame and disgrace, which is the lot of the wicked on God's day of judgment, when their true wickedness is exposed for all, and they're left only with the sufferings of hell. And here we have now elaborating more in verse 11 on the crimes that are attributed to Edom against Jacob. Beyam amadecho mineged, beyam shavois zorim cheloi, v'nachreim bahu she'arav, ועל ירושלים ידו גיירול, כמה תור כאחד מהם. Edom is accused of standing far away on the day when strangers, aliens, came to take into captivity the power of Judah and Jerusalem, when Nachrim, pagans, and strangers came to the very gates, and over Jerusalem they cast the lot, and you were as one of them. Here not only do we know from our midrashim of the historical events, for example, at the time of the captivity of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, when the Edomites did not help the Judeans to escape their captors, and on the contrary handed Judeans over to the captors. And there are other historical events that are quoted by our sages. We can also see in our time, for example, in the time of the Nazi Holocaust, that there were countries where there were strongholds of Jewish Torah practice, which were a kind of latter-day Yerushalayim there in the strongholds of Lithuania and Poland. And when the strange troops of the Nazis came in and invaded these countries, there were many locals who were only too willing to stand aside and let them do what they were doing, or even to collaborate with them. And now, in a series of challenges to Edom, God says, by the standards of true justice, how could you have behaved in this way? Verse 12, V'al teire v'yoimochecho b'yayim nacharoi, V'al tismach livnei Yehuda b'yayim avadam, V'al tigadil picho b'yayim tzara. In the Hebrew, this is addressed as a series of negative imperatives. Well, don't look on the day of your brother, on his day of being overturned, taken away by strangers. Don't rejoice in the specter of the children of Judah on the day of their being lost and ruined. And do not make your mouth big, literally. Don't speak loudly with your mouth, open a big mouth of mockery and scorn on the day of sorrow. And indeed, here one has coming into mind the many occasions where disaster has struck in the modern world, where we've seen supporters of these disasters actually distributing cakes and candies and sweets in the streets, and laughing and dancing and rejoicing over the calamity of others. And here God says this is not the just way. And continuing with these challenges, verse 13, with a series of rhetorical questions or negative imperatives. Al tovoi v'shar ami b'yoim Edom, al teire gamato b'ra'asoi b'yoim Edom, V'al tishlachno v'cheloi b'yayim Edoi. Do not come into the gates of my people on the day of their disaster. You should not have done this. How could you? Al tire gamato b'rosoi b'yom Edoi. Do not look, you also, among all the other enemies, at the evil that befell him on his day of disaster. And don't set forth your hand against his wealth on the day of his disaster. But we see that indeed the Romans plundered the treasures of the Holy Temple, and it's said that until today some of them are in the basement archives of the Vatican in Rome. And continuing the same series of challenges, V'al tahamoid ala perek leachris es pelitov V'al tasker seridov b'yoyim tzoro. Don't stand at the perek, at the passes, at the crossroads to cut off those who would strive to escape. This would be, the perek would be referring to a sort of a side path where people hoped they would be able to go to escape, but there were standing these collaborators with the enemies, handing them over to their captors. Al taske srido b'yom tzora, do not hand over the survivors on the day of trouble. Comes to mind here the transports of ships like the Exodus that the British authorities would not allow into Palestine after the Second World War, and resulting in the deaths of many people, and other similar disasters where possible escapees were actually either handed back to their captors or they were caused to die in other ways. And all of these are the moral indictment of Edom, and all of this is why this great vengeance will be carried out. Verse 15. Ki korov yoim Adonai ala kol hagoyim kasher oseso ye'oseh loch gemulecho yoshuv b'roishecho. God's day of judgment, the day of the Lord, that is close against all of the nations, and the nations will be called against you, Edom, as you practiced in your imperial rule with your cruelties and your oppression, so shall be done to you, Edom. What you handed over to the nations shall return upon your very head. Verse 16. Ki kasher shesisem al har kodeshi yishtu chol hagoyim etomid v'shasohu v'lahu v'hoyu keloi hoyu. Just as you drank on my holy mountain, so shall all the nations drink always. They shall drink to the point where their speech grows thick, their speech becomes thick with the drunkenness, and all of the nations shall be as if they never were. Well, Rashi explains that the Hebrew word lo'u is an expression with a connotation of mehumah, of consternation, and shemamon, devastation, and teruf das, the complete madness, where the da'at, the wisdom, is snatched away from the person. And this is a depiction of the consternation that will be at the end of time on account of the nations having drunk over the disaster that struck God's holy mountain. That is to say, the nations celebrated when the temples were destroyed, and their requite shall be when they shall be thrown into this drunken stupor. And now coming to the redemptive side of his prophecy, as it states in the Megillah of Esther, v'nahafoch hu, and it was the opposite. It was turned about. The fortunes of Esau, whose descendant was Haman the Amalekite, were reversed, and the fortunes of Israel rose up. Here, verse 17 in Ovadiah. Uvahar Tzion tihyeh feleito V'hoyo kodesh, v'yoresho beis Yaakov, eis meiroshehem. But on Mount Zion there shall be a peleta, a place of refuge, a remnant that shall survive, and they shall be holy, and they shall inherit. The house of Jacob shall inherit, the singular house of Jacob, v'yorashu, the plural, all of the members of the house of Jacob will inherit meiroshehem, those who sought to drive them out and dispossess them. Indeed, it is of great interest historically that in 1948, when after the partition plans for the land of Israel failed, when the Arab nations invaded the newly independent state and the Jordanian forces captured and occupied the old city of Jerusalem from 1948 until 1967, there remained in the hands of the Israeli forces Har Zion, which is said to be the burial place of David HaMelech, and this indeed remained in the state of Israel all the way through that period. It was on the very border, and here perhaps is a reference in our prophet Ovadiah to this. And now the verse that is speaking about how all of Edom will burn up at the end of days through the moral power and spiritual power of the house of Jacob and the house of Joseph. So here Ovadiah brings us immediately to the concept that the future redemption will involve all of the 12 tribes and will be led by Mashiach ben Yosef, who will be the leader of the returning 10 tribes, and it is the moral force of Yaakov and Yosef that will bring to the overthrow of Edom. Verse 18, V'hoyom veis Yaakov eish uveis Yosef lehavo uveis Esov lekash v'dolku bohem v'yacholum v'lo yeh sored leveis Esov ki Adonai diber. The house of Jacob will be the fire, the house of Joseph shall be the flame, and the house of Esau shall be like straw, and they shall kindle them and devour them, and there shall be no survivor to the house of Esau, for the Lord has spoken. Whether that must mean complete annihilation of Esau, or whether it can be understood as that the power of Esau and Edom should be completely overthrown at the time when the holy kingship will return to Jacob, as prophesied in Isaiah, and also very visible in the visions of Daniel, when the Malchus returns to the Kadisha Elyon, to the supremely holy tzaddikim. This is evoked in our verse, and this verse is quoted by Rashi in his commentary on the Torah, and indeed the prophecy of Ovadiah is the haftarah, the prophetic reading that is read when we read the parasha of Vayishlach towards the latter part of Genesis, which gives the account of the meeting up of Jacob with Esau after Jacob's sojourn with Laban. And here we see the ultimate overthrow of Esau by the house of Jacob. And now some very fascinating and important verses at the end of the prophecy, verses 19 through 21, evoking the future disposition of the land of Israel we see in much greater detail in the prophecy of Ezekiel chapter 47, the ultimate division of the land of Israel. And here we now see the return of the Jews and the tribes to the Holy Land, and we shall come here with the help of the commentator Radak to some very important insights into what happened to the exiles, the Jewish and Israelite exiles from the land of Israel, where they went to and from where they're coming back. Verse 19. Vayoreshu hanegev es harei sov והשפלו אס פלשתים, וירשו אס שדי אפרים, ואס שדי שומרון, ובנימין אס הגילעוד. We now go from south to north of the land of Israel, that the house of Jacob, they shall possess and inherit the Negev, the south, the Mount of Esau. This historically has been fulfilled in our generations with the expansion of the state of Israel to include the present-day Negev, and including the areas of Seir. The Shfela refers to the low lands at the center of the country of Israel, as Pelishtim, the cities of the Philistines. Many of the ancient cities of the Philistines have already come into the hands of Israel, like Ashdod and Ashkelon, and we await for Gaza soon to fall, as prophesied by the other prophets. V'yoshu esestei Ephraim, the tribes will repossess the field of Ephraim, the center of the 10 tribes, Sedei Shomron, the field of Samaria, Uvinyamin, together with the territories of Benjamin, and the Gilad, the northern area stretching up to the northeast of Israel and up to the Golan. And now we hear about the return of the exiles, a very important verse here. V'golus achil hazeh, verse 20. V'golus achil hazeh libanai Yisrael asher Kanaanim עד סופס, וגולוס ירושלים אשר בספרד, ירשו אזורי הנגב. Let us ignore the translations here and look at what our Hebrew text is telling us. Golus hachil hazeh, the exile of this force of the children of Israel, these exiled people who are coming back to the land of Israel from their exile. And where was their exile? Asher Kanaanim ad Tzorfas, with the Canaanites all the way to Tzorfas. V'goris Yushalayim asher b'Sfarad, the exile of Jerusalem that was in Sfarad. Yoshua's Ore and Negev, they shall inherit the cities of the south, that is to say, the south of the land of Israel. Well, we shall presently come back to this verse with the insights of Rabbi David Kimche, the Radak. Before we do, let us come to the closing words of the prophecy of Ovadiah here. V'olu moshim har Tzion nishpotes har Esau v'hoyaso l'Hashem hamelucho. These words known to those who pray the service of the traditional Jewish prayer book day by day, a verse that is quoted at the end of the daily recited Song of the Sea, that in time to come the Savior shall ascend on the Mount of Zion to judge the Mount of Esau, and the kingship shall be to God. Here is a verse that connects with the verses in Zechariah chapter 14, that at the end the kingship will be that of Hashem, and he will be king over the whole earth. On heaven and earth on that day known to God, and that will involve the justice that we perpetrated against Esau. And we, however, shall now focus on verse 20 and investigate the very interesting historical allusions contained in this prophecy. He speaks about this exile of this chayil, this power of the children of Israel. Where did they go? With the Canaanites to Tzorfas. Well, those who are familiar with contemporary Hebrew usage know that Tzarfat is the word used for the name given to France. And one may wonder, what are the Canaanites doing in France? And then we see another exile, the exile of Jerusalem, that turns up in Sfarad, and Sfarad is known to be Spain. So clearly the verse is talking about the return of these exiles to the land of Israel. But the question we are left with is, who are these exiled children of Israel that were with the Canaanites in Tzarfat in France, and who are those of Jerusalem that were with that are in Sfarad in Spain? So let's turn now to Radak's commentary on our verse. And Radak tells us that the verse is referring to the children of Israel that are scattered around in their exile. And the verse says that they are with the Canaanites. They went into exile with the Canaanites all the way to Tzarfat. And Jerusalem had an exile in Sfarad. Now says Radak, Jerusalem the exiles Jerusalem in Spain that are going to inherit the cities of the Negev, says Radak, these are the cities of Judah, because the share of Judah was in the south of the land of Israel, to the south of Jerusalem. The northern border of Judah went right up to the site of the Holy Temple. And so Jeremiah says of the cities of Judah, Orei HaNegev Sogaru, the cities of the south have closed their gates on account of the siege. In Potach, there's nobody who can open up the siege. Now he says this expression Yorshu in our Hebrew verse here in Ovadiah. The subject of that verse is those who were exiled from Jerusalem. And he says that is to say, the children of Judah shall return to their land and their cities. Or he could be saying that they will all of Israel will have this inheritance on account of Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was in the tribal share of Judah, but all of the tribes of Israel will have a share in Jerusalem, as it says in the prophecy of Ezekiel. And now this very interesting commentary of Radak. V'golos ha'chil hazeh, the exile of this power, commenting generally on this exile of Israel and Judah from the land of Israel. He says, Hu Galus Titus, this is referring to the exile that came about under the Roman Emperor Titus, who destroyed the Second Temple. Shehiglo ba'arotzo, Titus took many Jews captive, as is depicted in the accounts of the destruction of the temple, the Second Temple, by Josephus, and he spread them around the lands, and these are the lands of the nations, the lands of Alemannia and Ashkelonia. Alemannia, well, of course, in French, Allemagne is Germany, and Ashkelon would be a reference to Colonia, Cologne, which is in Germany, and we should discuss that in a moment. And Tzarfat, Hushikorin, Franza, this is France. V'arzot Sfarad shekorim Sfanya, the lands of Sfarad are those that are called Spain. Uvenei Yerushalayim hem shegolu b'Sfarad. It was the inhabitants of Jerusalem that went into exile in Sfarad. Well, now, when we talk about the exile to Spain, we should bear in mind that also many of those who were exiled to Spain also penetrated eastwards from Spain across North Africa, founding the very illustrious Jewish communities of the North African countries. And indeed, these communities, such as Morocco, had traditions about how the exiles from Judah brought with them, for example, saplings of etrog trees, which they planted in Morocco. And it's well known that the Moroccan etrogim are considered to be authentic examples of the original species of the etrog. So we see that we have an exile that comes from Judea to Spain. That would rather indicate that the original tribe of Judah are more to be found among the Edot HaMizrach, the oriental communities that spread forth from Spain and until today are known as the Sfaradim. Now others, he says, others from the land of Israel, they went into exile to these other lands are mentioned, and these were lands which were under the rule of the Romans. For example, mentioned by Radak earlier, Germany was already a Roman colony in the time of Titus. We have the histories of Julius Caesar giving the account of the conquest of the wars against Germany. And presently we shall hear why Germany was such an ancient habitation. So the other Israelites were going to these territories of Germany and France, and from there they spread out to other countries on their own initiative. So they spread out, including to the countries which are the countries of Yishmael, namely the eastern and southern countries. Now, they say according to tradition, Ki b'nei eretz Alemania hayu Canaanim, the children of the land of Alemania, Germany, were Canaanites. Well, how did the Canaanites get there? Explains Radak. Ki kshe pono Canaani mipnei Yoshua, for when the Canaanites evacuated the land of Israel from before Joshua, as Radak has written on the book of Joshua, those Canaanites that decided not to try to fight Joshua, and this is particularly the tribe of the Girgashi, which are not mentioned in the account of the conquest of the land, although they are mentioned in the Torah as one of the Canaanite nations of the land. So it was the Girgashi, according to our tradition, they went, according to this tradition, to Germany. A most interesting quirk of history that if it is the case that there were other northern kingdoms or tribes like the Vikings and the barbarians that invaded Germany, there was an original prehistoric group there that were actually racially Canaanites. And this is a very interesting feature of the history of a nation that has proved to be the source of so much violence to the world, particularly in the 20th century. Ashkelonia, the very word colonia, would refer to the colony. There was a colony there. The Romans had their colony in a land that had already been inhabited for many generations by Canaanites. So this is all in the land of Ashkenaz, which is the contemporary Jewish name, the latter-day Jewish name for Germany. Until today, the Jews of Eastern Europe would refer to the Germans as Canaanites. We see this, for example, in the Shavachia Baal Shem Tov, the account of the life of the Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, that he referred to his non-Jewish attendant as a Canaani. And so we see many profound historical ironies in this verse at the latter end of Ovadiah, and we today are awaiting the true complete fulfillment of the prophecy of Ovadiah against Adam, not because we wish to see any downfalls, but because we wish to see the ascendancy of the Kedoshei Elyon, the supremely holy, righteous Tzaddikim, who will be those that will inherit the earth at the end of days, speedily in our time. So with that, my friends, we conclude our studies of Tanakh for today, and we'll now have a very brief interval, just a few minutes before we turn to our continuation of our halachic studies. Back again now for the halachic part of today's study. Coming down from the very flighty prophecy of Ovadiah to the nitty-gritty of our practical work of fulfilling the mitzvot and salting our meat, salting the stone in our hearts to soften it up and remove any impurities and come to self-purification. Shalom, today, the 28th day of the month of Adar of the year 5778, corresponding to the 15th of March of the year 2018. We continue in our studies of Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, Hilchos Dam Melicha V'Tzliya, the concise laws of prohibition of blood, salting of meat, or roasting of meat. Chapter 4, continuing with the laws of the actual procedure of the salting, we will learn that when our meat is ready for the salting, we have to salt it on all sides of each piece of meat. In the Talmud, in Tractate Menachos of the Babylonian Talmud, Daf Kuf Aleph, we find the sages discussing the procedure of salting. And the Talmud says there that the person brings the particular limb or piece of meat and places the salt upon it and overturns it and puts salt on it and then puts it into the place where the piece of meat will be left for the salting process. So we find here quite explicitly spelled out in the Talmud that when a person is salting the meat in order to kasher it for cooking purposes, that it is necessary milachatchila from the outset to ensure that the piece of meat is covered with salt on every place that is possible. And this, according to our Rishonim, is this opinion of our Rishonim. Some of our Rishonim, the earlier sages, said that this law mentioned in the Talmud in Menachot is melachatchila, that from the outset we should endeavor to see that the meat is covered on all sides. However, in the opinion of many of the Rishonim, if the person only salted the piece of meat on one side, but yavad, the salting will be deemed to have been effective because according to this opinion, even if the meat was salted only one side, the salt would be effective in drawing out blood from the entire piece of meat. Against them are other opinions among the Rishonim that the covering of the meat with salt on all sides is not just milachatchila, something we would preferentially do if we can, but me'ikar hadin. From the very essence of the law of salting, the Talmud is bringing down that the meat must be covered on all sides. And if the person did not cover the meat with salt on all sides, then the meat is not deemed to have been properly kashered, and there's no difference here in this more stringent opinion between whether the piece of meat was a thick piece of meat or a less thick piece of meat. And the reason for the second more stringent opinion, that the meat must, under all circumstances, be covered by salt on all sides, the reason is that if the salt were only scattered on, it is only when the salt is spread over all sides of the meat that the salt has the power to penetrate and, as it were, heat up all of the meat at one time, and that is when the salt will have the power to draw out the blood from all parts of all of the piece of meat all at one time. And this will cause blood that is deep in the inner fiber of the meat also to be drawn outwards. And according to this more stringent opinion, if the person were only to salt the meat from one side of the piece of meat, the salt would not have the power to draw out the blood from all parts of the meat, and it would only draw out blood from that part of the meat which is adjacent to the side of the meat that was salted. So here we have a typical case of two opinions, one more lenient and one more stringent among our Rishonim. And let us see now how the Halachah navigates a course between them. And the Halachah L'Maaseh, the practical Halachah, has been determined by Rabbi Moshe Isserlis, the second voice in our Shulchan Aruch, reflecting the Ashkenazi tradition of the Halachah, that where there is not going to be substantial financial loss if a piece of meat was not salted on both sides, then we should take the more stringent opinion and to forbid a piece of meat that was only salted on one side. Even b'diavad, even if that piece of meat that was only salted on one side was already cooked, we would, if there was not substantial financial loss, discard that piece of meat. However, it rules the Ramah that in a case of substantial financial loss, if the piece of meat had to be discarded because it was only salted on one side, in that case we could rely upon the more lenient opinion and permit the meat that had only been salted on one side. Well, now, continuing with these laws relating to the procedure of the salting, so clearly we see here that melechatchila, when salting meat, we must endeavor to see that the meat is salted on all sides, and we should be going in later sessions in more detail into the laws that apply if meat was not salted on one side. But continuing with the normative process, we now come to the issue of fat. Fat, too, if there were pieces of fat from the animal which are to be salted, they also have to be salted, and they have to be salted on all sides. However, in the case of fat, if the person did only salt one side of the fat, there are those who say that even if it was not a case of financial loss involved, if the fat was to be discarded, we could still, in the case of fat, rely upon the more lenient opinion of permitting it even though it was only salted on one side, because fat is not considered to be a place where there is any presumption of blood being there. Well, now we come to the issue of how poultry is to be salted. When we are preparing poultry for kosher consumption, it is necessary to open the bird and to take out the inside organs of the bird which are separated. Some of them are forbidden for consumption, others are permitted. In any event, when poultry is being prepared for kosher consumption, the bird will be cut open, and the inner organs and the inside of the animal will have to be salted also, as well as the outside of the bird. And if the person only salted the inside of the bird or only salted the outside of the bird, the law here is the same law as meat that was only salted on one side, just as we just heard it, that melechatchila, one has to salt the meat on both sides, and if it was only salted on one side, only in a case of severe financial loss, if the poultry were to be discarded, would we be able to save it. So, therefore, when opening a bird that has been koshered has been slaughtered in a kosher way with a kosher shechita, kosher slaughter, the bird must be open to enable access to the inside of the bird in order to be able to salt the interior of the bird. So the opening must be a large enough opening to be able to salt all of the inside. And there were some of the major halachic authorities who ordained in their areas that birds would need to be split into two, literally split apart, in order to let the salting be conducted in a proper way. So for people living in those regions, the concept of having a whole bird that could be stuffed did not exist. The bird, we do know of the sewing up of the bird after it's been stuffed, but the bird would have to be opened up. Now, this applies specifically to birds, but we now address a question with relation to the kashering of other organs of the animal that may have some cavity. If the slaughtered animal has been cut up, ready for the salting, is it necessary to cut open limbs or inner organs of the animal that may have a cavity? Well, the law is that in most cases it is not necessary to open up such limbs or parts of the animal in order to salt them from the inside. It's sufficient in most cases to salt these organs from the outside, because since they were closed in their nature, in the way they grew and developed in the animal, they're considered to be just like a piece of thick meat, where it's sufficient to salt the piece of thick meat on all sides with no need to cut it into two parts. And there is a difference of the law with respect to the lungs of the animal. The lungs of the animal are permitted for kosher consumption. Now, the issues of the lungs of the animal are more delicate than most other organs of the animal, because most other organs of the animal do not have a presumption that there will be any morbidity that would render the animal a trephor and forbidden for Jewish consumption. However, morbidities of the lungs are more widespread. Morbidities of the lungs would include adhesions to the inside of the lungs, which may indicate some perforation in the lung of the animal. And for that reason, our kosher butchers are customarily actually open up the lungs of slaughtered animals, and this is done to check the lung for adhesions and any other morbidities. And the word glut, when in its original meaning, when applied to kosher, glut kosher, the word glut in Yiddish means smooth, that the lung was tested and checked that it is smooth without any adhesion. So lungs in any case are opened up prior to the salting. And since we do open the lungs, the halachah is that we must, when salting the lungs, salt the inside also. And if the lungs of the animal were salted only on the exterior, their law would be the same as a piece of meat that was only salted on one side. However, in the event that the lung had not been opened up prior to the salting, if the person only salted the lung from the exterior, that salting would be deemed to be effective, even there are hollows in the lung, because since the lung was not opened up, it is still deemed to be one thick piece of meat. Now, just before we leave the main rules of the salting procedure, let's just take note that if a piece of meat had been salted properly on all sides, but during the time frame when the meat must be left in its salt for the salt to draw out the blood, if during that half hour or so time frame the person cut one piece of meat into two pieces, it is going to be necessary to rinse the place of the cut all over again and to salt the meat all over again in that place of the cut. And if the person did not do that, since the salt had not yet been the full requisite time frame in the salt, so therefore, where the person cut the meat during the salting and did not wash it and resalt it, that meat is deemed to have the same law as a piece of meat that was salted only on one side, where only b'di'avad, if there was considerable financial loss, could the meat be salvaged? Now, if after the full elapse of the salting process, after half hour, if after that time the person cut the meat into two, there is no need to rinse or resalt the meat, because the meat is already deemed to have undergone the salting process, and all blood that had to be removed from the meat is deemed to have been removed. So with that, we complete our halachic study for today, and we have indeed reached the end of our time frame for today. And I would like to wish all of you, my dear friends, a Rosh Chodesh Tov Mvorach, a new moon for the month of Nisan that should be good and blessed and bring about a month that will truly be the month of our redemption and lead to Pesach Kasher V'Sameach, a pure and a joyous Pesach. I will be resuming our Kollel studies, God willing, on Monday, April 16th, and I do hope to be able to give a Shavua Tov hookup on Sunday, April 15th, and if I'm able to give any broadcast prior to the festival of Pesach, I will notify in the Azamra diary and Kollel update. So with that, my dear friends, for today from Yerushalayim, that we come to the conclusion of our studies, and Chodesh Tov Morach, a good and a blessed month, and Chag Kasher V'Sameach, a kosher and a joyous Pesach.